Hello and welcome to this lecture on UCC in contemporary Indian politics. The Uniform Civil Code has re-emerged as one of the most debated constitutional issues in India's recent political and legal discourse. Although enshrined as a directive principle in Article 44, the question of its implementation continues to divide opinion. Over the last decade, renewed public discussions, parliamentary references, and state level consultations have placed the UCC at the center of policy debates. The 21st and 22nd Law Commission of 2018 and 23 revisited the issue, examining social readiness, legal feasibility, and the balance between equality and cultural autonomy. Meanwhile, state governments like Uttarakhand and Gujarat have announced their intention to draft Uniform Civil Code uh, or UCC bills. The central government maintains that the UCC aligns with the constitutional goal of gender justice and national integration. Uh, Though implementation must respect diversity, critics, however, view the move as politically sensitive, fearing it could erode minority and tribal protections. This contemporary phase reflects India's enduring dilemmas: how to reconcile unity with diversity, modern equality with traditional pluralism, and reform with constitutional restraint, or how much time should be given to the communities who are or who appear to be reluctant to go for uniform civil code, while Christians and Parsis have already started the process of reformation and they have come up with their own packages. The 21st Law Commission's consultation paper on reform of family law concluded that a UCC was neither necessary nor desirable at this stage. Instead, it recommended reforms within existing personal laws to achieve equality within diversity. The Commission recognized India's unique legal pluralism and advised modernization through codification and harmonization rather than uniformity. It proposed gender neutral laws on marriage, divorce, adoption, and inheritance while preserving community specific customs. The report highlighted that secularism in India is inclusive, not assimilationist. It urged participatory reform through dialogue with religious groups, women organizations, and civil society. The Commission warned that abrupt uniformity might alienate minorities and weaken constitutional trust. Its pragmatic stance balanced constitutional equality with cultural autonomy, framing reform as a continuous democratic process. This 2018 report became the intellectual foundation for later discussions, illustrating that India's constitutional philosophy supports justice through consultation, not coercion, a principle central to both governance and secular ethics. But at the same time, gender justice is definitely a constitutional goal of India. In 2023, the 22nd Law Commission reopened consultation on the UCC, inviting over 8.5 million public responses, a record for any legal reform debate. The Commission's approach reflected changing social realities and political priorities. It acknowledged that while gender equality remains a core constitutional goal, social consensus is essential before adopting uniform laws. The 2023 consultations explored regional models, including Goa's civil code, tribal customs, and gender just amendments to Hindu and Muslim laws. The Commission emphasized the need for codified personal laws that eliminate discrimination while respecting diversity. Its interim findings indicated wide divergence. Urban populations favored uniformity, whereas minorities and tribal groups preferred autonomy. The process reaffirmed the democratic principle that law must evolve through dialogue. The 22nd Commission's work demonstrates continuity with the 2018 approach, reform by participation, not imposition. It also reflects India's changing legal consciousness, where gender justice and cultural pluralism coexist within the constitutional framework of equality and fraternity. Successive governments have articulated differing positions on the UCC, reflecting political ideologies and social contexts. The present central government since 2019 has reaffirmed the UCC as a constitutional commitment under Article 44, framing it essential for gender equality and national unity. Official statements by the Ministry of Law and Justice emphasize that reform will proceed only after broad consultation. Parliamentary replies and press releases highlight the government's intent to balance equality with cultural sensitivity. Meanwhile, opposition parties caution that without consensus, the UCC could polarize society. State level initiatives, particularly in Uttarakhand in 2023, signal experimentation with localized versions of uniform civil law. The Prime Minister and the Union Home Minister have publicly reiterated that a UCC is necessary for true secularism, which means equal law for all citizens. These statements reveal how constitutional ideals continue to influence contemporary governance. Yet, political polarization also shows the difficulty of translating moral aspiration into practical legislation in a diverse democracy. Uttarakhand became the first Indian state to formally initiate a draft UCC in 2023. A five-member committee led by retired Justice Ranjan Desai was established to prepare recommendations. The draft reportedly aims to create gender-neutral provisions in marriage, divorce, inheritance, and live-in relationships, applying uniformly to all citizens in the state. It seeks to harmonize customs while exempting scheduled tribes, acknowledging constitutional protections under Article 371 and the 5th and 6th schedule. The Uttarakhand experiment is viewed as a potential model for other states, including Gujarat and Assam. Supporters hail it as a step towards fulfilling Article 44. Critics caution that hasty implementation could marginalize minority voices. The initiative marks the first concrete legislative move towards the UCC since independence, transforming constitutional discourse into policy practice. It also demonstrates the federal flexibility of India's constitution, allowing states to innovate within national ideals, blending local realities with constitutional morality. The Goa Civil Code, derived from Portuguese law and retained post 1961, stands as India's only functioning uniform civil code. It governs marriage, divorce, succession, and adoption for all Goans, irrespective of religion, with minor community specific exceptions. The Supreme Court in Jos Palu Coutinho versus Maria Luisa Valentina Pereira 2019 praised Goa's code as a model of equality and secular governance. However, scholars note that even Goa's UCC retains elements of Catholic canon law, showing that perfect uniformity is complex in plural societies. The Goa model demonstrates that codification with flexibility can coexist with constitutional principles. It has inspired debates on replicating similar frameworks in other states. Yet, critics argue that legal uniformity without social readiness risks backlash, which is, I think, is not acceptable because Indian state has given more than 6 decades to the minorities to get ready. And again, I would say that Christians and Parsis have come up with their own plans or packages of social reformation in the light of gender equality or gender justice. Goa's experience proves that successful reform depends not only on law, on educate, but also on education, awareness, and participatory implementation. Definitely, legal awareness and Understanding of the ideal of gender equality and the significance of gender equality is very, very important to make the people accept uniformity in personal laws also. It remains a symbol of India's potential to harmonize diversity through inclusive legal design. Tribal and customary laws and complexity to UCC reform. The Constitution under Article 244 to 371 and the 5th and 6th schedules grants autonomy to tribal regions, recognizing their distinct traditions. Tribal communities in the northeast, central India, and Jammu and Kashmir follow customary laws governing marriage, inheritance, and dispute resolution. These systems reflect collective identities rooted in social harmony rather than formal codification. In fact, this was the case with the Hindu community also. In the process of codification of Hindu personal law, a number of liberal elements of or the practices of Hindu community existing in different parts of the country were killed in the name of codification. However, this issue was not raised at that time. These systems, as I referred to, the tribal communities, reflect collective identities rooted in social harmony rather than formal codification. Critics warn that a national UCC might dilute these constitutional protections. The Law Commission 2018 and 23 acknowledged this concern, recommending exemptions or separate framework for tribal and regional laws. The challenge lies in harmonizing tribal justice systems with national equality standards without erasing local identities. Policymakers increasingly recognize that one size fits all cannot define India's pluralism. But that was the case with Hindu community also, Hindu society also, because Hindu society in itself is not uniform and is full of plurality and diversity. But at one point, in order to achieve the common target of equality, to bring Hindu women at par with Hindu men, uh, uniformity was brought about, uh, of course, at the cost of diversity and plurality. So one has to understand that plurality is important, diversity is important, but then the goal of gender equality, gender justice is higher than that. And at times we have to accept or compromise with the diversity and plurality for a better goal of women's rights and women equality and gender justice. India has witnessed a gradual codification of community laws as a step towards harmonization. Hindu personal law was reformed through Hindu Code Bill, killing number of pro women and liberal principle, and Hindu community in itself was highly diverse and plural because there's no common book, there's no common pope whose writ runs throughout the community. Rather, it is a bundle of philosophical traditions, and in different parts from north to south, east to west, we have different systems of marriage, divorce, women rights, and the property rights rules. But however, in the name of uniformity, it was killed, or you may say that in order to achieve the higher goal of gender equality and gender justice, Hindu community agreed to uniformity at the cost of diversity and plurality. The Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Act 2019 modernized divorce practices. Christian, Parsi, and tribal laws have also undergone reforms. States like Nagaland and Mizoram maintain customary courts under constitutional safeguards. The ongoing trend shows a dual process: modernization within communities and codification across them. This incremental approach reflects India's pragmatic constitutionalism, favoring reform through diversity, not uniformity. Regional codification ensures a local participation and avoids alienation. The Law Commission of 2023 emphasized that such efforts gradually achieve the spirit of the UCC without abolishing personal identity. The shift from uniformity of law to uniformity of justice illustrates a maturing democracy, where shared constitutional ethics rather than identical codes unify the nation's legal and moral vision. True. But at times, when justice demands uniformity, then we have to take into consideration how that can be achieved. Well, implementing a UCC faces several legal and political hurdles. Constitutionally, personal laws are included in the concurrent list, allowing both center and the state to legislate. However, any central UCC must respect minority rights under Article 25 to 30 and tribal autonomy under the 5th and 6th schedule. This is the claim of the minorities. Politically, consensus remains elusive. Regional parties fear alienation of cultural groups. Religious organizations view UCC as majoritarian without any draft ever produced before the public. Let the draft be there and then decide how this draft acts, whether it is implementing a majoritarian will or not. Well, legally, drafting a single code that respects all traditions poses immense complexity. But then the goal is gender justice, and therefore, the draft should be in a way that it respects the plurality and diversity to whatever extent possible, with the larger goal of uniformity or equal rights, so that no women belonging to any religious group faces marginalization or discrimination like Shahbano or Sharabano. So you see that despite the Supreme Court's judgment in favor of Shah Bano, the poor lady never agreed to receive any compensation under the pressure from the community, and therefore there is a need to really educate the masses. There's a need to make them understand that a destitute Muslim woman too deserves dignified living. The challenge is not legal capacity but democratic legitimacy. We have to balance equality, identity, and autonomy, and as well as sensitive policy making. We have to do enough of groundwork, like creating an enlightened community that understands and respects the principle of gender equality or gender justice. Public debates on the Uniform Civil Code has become increasingly vibrant in the last decade. Civil society organizations, women's rights groups, and religious institutions have all contributed to the discussion. Women's collectives such as the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan and All India Democratic Women's Association have supported gender just reforms, but emphasized that equality must emerge through consultation, not compulsion. Religious leaders across Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and tribal communities have expressed divergent opinions, often reflecting local context. But you see that at times the government has to take strict action. So, if government was going by the public opinion, it would have never been in a position to ban child marriage or raise the minimum age for marriage, because the people would have never agreed to do away with the practices of child marriage or to increase the marriageable age for the girls to 18 and now from 18 to 21. Similarly, widow remarriage, the law came, social acceptance came later. Similarly, divorce, of course, it was legalized in 1955-56, but social acceptance came just a decade before. So many times it happens that the government has to be strict and they have to take stringent actions, and with a higher goal of gender equality and gender justice, and then gradually it is accepted by the people also once the law is there. Well, parliamentary discussion on the UCC continued to reflect India's ideological diversity. There's lots of politicization of the entire issue, and therefore it has become more a issue of say certain groups being in favor of UCC and other groups being against UCC, but nobody is really talking about what women exactly wants. And there is so much of politicization of the entire issue, as if there are no women voters. Members across party lines agree on the need for gender justice but differ on the methods. Proponents argue that UCC fulfills constitutional promises of equality under Article 44, while opponents fear erosion of religious and tribal autonomy. But the fact is that, in fact, they are appeasing the groups of people for political vote. Maybe the political groups are busy appeasing vote banks on both sides of the lines. In that politicization or in that kind of debate, the real issue of equality for women and justice for women is somewhere diluted. Nobody is asking what women wants and how to enlighten women, how to give legal education to women, how to make women understand that what is good for them and what will give them more security uh, out of this or in this patriarchal system. So, of course, the polarization, though challenging, also represents India's democratic vibrancy. But the political parties, there are certain issues wherein political parties have to think not only in party terms, but they have to think in terms of constitutional morality, constitutional goal, and the greater good of the half of the population. Federalism remains a critical dimension of the UCC debate. The Indian Constitution distributes legislative power between the center and the state under the concurrent list. Personal laws fall within the shared jurisdiction, meaning states can innovate within their boundaries. The Uttarakhand draft illustrates this flexibility, allowing localized reform while respecting constitutional parameters. Other states such as Gujarat and Assam have signaled interest in similar framework. However, diverse social conditions make a single national model difficult to implement uniformity. Well, let us see, maybe after these small state based experiments, we may move a little bit in the direction of uniformity, if not uniformity, at least towards reforming the personal laws in a way that it is not discriminatory, it is not biased and prejudiced towards a particular section of the society, and all men and women, Hindu, Muslim, or Christian, or Parsi, have security to lead a dignified living. Of course, judiciary continues to influence UCC discourse even amid legislative development. Supreme Court observations in Sharabano and Jos Palo Coutinho emphasize that personal law reform must advance constitutional morality. Courts have reiterated that equality and secularism are fundamental features of the Constitution. The judiciary, however, has exercised restraint, refusing to compel Parliament to legislate a UCC. But yes, through different judgments, the court has given enough signals that personal laws are discriminatory and they are biased, and women are suffering because of these discriminatory personal laws and are approaching the judiciary. This is high time that, of course, legislature should think about codifying the codifying the civil law, or at least reforming the personal laws at a greater pace in the light of human rights and gender justice. Well, judicial engagement ensures debates remain anchored in constitutional ethics rather than political expediency. Court's cautious yet principled approach strengthens democratic accountability. Through interpretation, the judiciary upholds the ideal that law must evolve with society, but always within the moral framework of justice, fairness, and inclusion. But at times, the law has to be there, and the society has to abide by that judgment of the court or the decision of the court. And this is how the society is mentally prepared for a bigger change vis-a-vis their laws. Well, I have already discussed the issue of constitutional morality that serves as ethical foundation for any UCC reform. It requires that laws, policies, and governance uphold dignity, equality, and liberty over cultural or majoritarian preference. The principle ensures that reform remains consistent with the preamble's ideals of justice and fraternity. So, law commission reports, parliamentary debates, Supreme Court judgments together are going to achieve the target of social justice or gender justice, and that no policy can disregard fundamental rights. This doctrine compels lawmakers to balance religious freedom with gender equality, preserving harmony in plural society, at the same time bringing about required changes also. Policymakers use constitutional morality as a benchmark to evaluate potential UCC frameworks, ensuring inclusivity and fairness. So it transforms the debate from political confrontation to moral reflection. Upholding constitutional morality also demands empathy, recognizing historical injustices done to a particular section of the society. And the Committee on the Status of Women, the report of this committee towards equality also in its report mentioned that women is one of the historically most subjugated group of the society, and therefore we need to really seriously think about social justice and gender justice. As India continues to debate the UCC, this principle acts as moral compass guiding legislative prudence. True reforms will be realized with a mix of or a hybrid of power, conscience, constitutional morality, respecting plurality also, with achieving a broader goal of gender justice. Media has become a decisive force shaping public perception of the UCC. News, debates, editorials, and digital platforms have amplified awareness but also intensified polarization. Mainstream media often simplifies complex legal issues into political binaries, while social media amplifies both informed voices and misinformation. The Press Information Bureau and Ministry of Law and Justice have issued clarification stressing that UCC reform will be consultative and transparent. Academic institutions, think tanks, and legal experts increasingly use public forums to explain constitutional principles. Positive engagements by media can build understanding of secularism, equality, and gender justice. Well, the future of UCC depends on inclusive dialogue, please phased reforms, and trust building across communities. Law Commission findings suggest a gradual participatory approach is more effective, but there are states like Uttarakhand that can serve as testing grounds for region specific frameworks later refined at the national level. Incremental codification of personal laws can achieve uniformity in justice without uniformity in form. Education and awareness campaigns must accompany legal reform to ensure societal readiness. But, however, there are communities like Christians and Parsis who have, through education and progressive thinking, already initiated the social reformation. The Muslims have to take more initiatives. Through sensitization, the I think the Muslim leadership and the Muslim organizations need to play a vital role in sensitizing people towards gender equality and gender justice. Well, the debate over uniform civil code in contemporary India reflects the living nature of its constitution, the maturity of its democracy. It is dynamic, inclusive, and constantly evolving. Well, the Law Commission's reports and the statement and the government statements, judicial engagements, state-led experiments all reveal an ongoing process of negotiation between equality and diversity. India's strength lies in its ability to reform through dialogue. The UCC question is no longer about uniformity of law, but about uniformity of justice. Let the draft be there, and then every community can have its own opinion. We can have public debates. Without a draft, it is difficult to, move towards the direction of uniformity or gender justice. The nation's pluralism need not oppose equality. Rather, both can reinforce each other under the rule of law. As India moves forward, the challenge will be to institutionalize fairness while honoring identity, and diversity. The UCC debate ultimately represents not division but democratic dialogue, an ongoing testament to India's enduring commitment to freedom, justice, and equality for all its citizens. Thank you.